Hello everybody, my name is Kaylin King
And I'm some guy that was dragged off the street to help record. Please send help.
Anyway, so today's stories are quite interesting ones, and I have my assistant with me here today.
I haven't seen the light of day for 3 days.
He will be helping reading a few of the stories because it's just gonna help quite a lot.
I'm being serious. Please send help.
Anyway, so enjoy the video, relax, get some coffee, and...
Oh god, I'm not getting out of here, am I?
Sit the fuck down. I've always loved birds, going on hikes, pointing them out to my family. They've always been such fun creatures. Every winter break, my family sends me to my Uncle Jack's little cabin with my notebook so I can take a break from high school. They never let me keep my phone, and anytime anything comes up, I notify him immediately. Sounds like a terrible idea, right? I've been doing this for a few years now, and luckily, nothing bad has happened. Well, until this one. For reference, my uncle is the strongest and smartest man you'll ever meet. Retired soldier, at least 3 medals won for his courage. You know the type. If he was dropped in the rainforest for a week, he'd survive by drinking python venom and spearing for piranhas. If you whipped out a phone in front of him, he would point out every little thing and ask about it. I love him to bits. We're both a little strange with our families, so he became like a second father to me. He lives in a quaint little cabin in some Washington rainforest. There's a single dirt road that you exit onto when you leave the highway, and after maybe an hour, you'll arrive at his little wooden home. My aunt passed away a few years ago, which I think is why my mom always sends me to his house. And so she did. As I played games on my phone, in the backseat, my mom looked a little distressed as she drove through the dirt path. Apparently my uncle had been acting a little odd, which she chalked up to old age, but she knew her brother well, and it was the first sign that things wouldn't go how I hoped. He was normal when we first arrived, and for a good few days things were just as they should have been. My uncle would enforce a curfew strictly at 9, before pulling me out of bed at 6 in the morning. I would watch birds on hikes and draw them in my notebook, while my uncle told jokes about the Marines. I'd heard them about 1,000 times before, of course, but just the sound of my uncle's voice was pleasant. It wasn't until the 4th day of my week-long trip that I noticed what my mom was talking about. He would mutter under his breath, stare at the sky at night when he thought I wasn't looking, and for my uncle, silence was rare. His hearty laughter and confident demeanor were noticeably missing throughout the day. By the time the sun was setting, my uncle changed the curfew to 6. There would be no leaving the house after the sun had set. Even though he was usually strict, he had never missed out on cooking s'mores while playing his banjo by the campfire. Not once. That night, as I read my book under my flashlight, I glanced out the window only to see a pair of bright eyes staring right back at me. I knew it was wildlife, but my uncle's behavior had made me a little itchy. The next day when I asked about it, he told me that it was a fox, and that their eyes would shine an ominous red at night. It wasn't for a few days until I remembered that foxes didn't live in this area of Washington. The next day, my uncle looked visibly nervous. He told me that he'd be going hunting, and he wouldn't be back until evening. There were cheese crackers in the pantry if I got hungry. He would be back soon. Don't go out too far until he gets back. The usual. At this point I was extremely nervous, alone to watch his cabin. After he left, I looked around a little. This feeling, this horrible unease that I was somehow being watched creeped into my soul. This wasn't a prank. The only pranks my uncle had ever done were filling my shoes with dirt and letting a spider loose in my bedsheets. I knew I was alone, but the feeling wouldn't go away. After looking around a bit, in the same spot where I had seen the eyes last night were tracks. Human tracks. 2 bare footprints in the dirt. My uncle didn't come back that night. I've only pulled 3 all-nighters without sleep, and that was one of them. I stayed awake my whole night with my curtains drawn, too afraid to see what might be watching on the other side. I hid underneath my covers, the wind howling outside. I was comforted by the fact that if something was outside, it would be suffering in the 20-degree windy weather. I spent the whole day reading, too afraid to go out, my stomach slightly woozy from the diet of peanut butter and jelly sandwiches with crackers. By nighttime, my uncle still hadn't come back. The next day, my mom would come to pick me up, but sadly, that isn't all that happened. I remember exactly how the night went. At maybe 10 at night, I heard a knock on the door. My uncle kept a key underneath the frayed welcome mat. He never knocked. His boisterous self wouldn't let him knock on the door of his own house. Silently, I made my way to my bathroom, locking the door behind me, making sure that there weren't any windows in it. I was clutching an aluminum bat that my uncle never used, for the vague hope that if someone or something got into the house, I could defend myself. The knocking got more violent. Something was slamming on the door. Then, as abruptly as it started, it stopped. Then I heard it again. This time, it was on the other side of the house. Glass shattering, a loud thud. My heart was pumping. I turned off the lights in the bathroom as footsteps creaked on the floorboards outside. It walked right by my door, a shadow blocking the light from filtering in the bottom of the door frame. I knew better than to make noise. They hung around for a good few hours. My adrenaline wore out after a while, with just pure fear remaining. If only my uncle was there. Luckily, I had turned off the lights in my room. There was nothing that signified I was in the house, but I still held my breath until they scampered back out the window. At least, that was what it sounded like. I didn't take the risk of leaving. I slept in the bathroom that night. The next morning I woke up to my mom yelling and knocking on the door, opening the bathroom door. The floor was covered in blood. A trail of sticky crimson still damp on the wooden floor. I nearly threw up, running to the door. My mom stood in front of me, enraged at how I hadn't responded. Where was Uncle Jack? Why did I sleep in so late? I just hugged her, sobbing. I didn't know what happened, or why. She pretty quickly realized that things weren't normal. After taking a look inside the cabin, she called the local police. I still remember the cold interrogation room. Where was I that night? What happened to my uncle? Whose blood was on the floor? I answered everything honestly, my eyes blurred with tears and my nose clumped with snot. It was horrible. I was dismissed as a suspect. I think they felt bad for me, crying my eyes out in front of them. It's been a year. After multiple searches, none of the local authorities could find my uncle. He was well and truly gone. His house got shut down. I spent this winter break at home, remembering what happened. I don't think I'll ever forget my Uncle Jack and his cabin in the woods, and I don't think I'll ever truly know what happened in that forest. Maybe it's better that way. I don't think I want to know what happened that night.
This is a story about an old house in a rural part of central Massachusetts. It was a huge old house that had originally been half of a hotel. The other half was nearby. For some reason it was split in half and the halves moved apart. That always perplexed me. It was a huge 3-story Victorian structure with wide porches. How and why the building was split was never explained to me. The house was owned by some friends of my parents. They would host parties with lots of people and the women would play the piano and sing. There were lots of kids there and we would run around inside and outside while the adults socialized. My memories of the house were vague, as this was more than 40 years ago. I do remember that the house was huge and had way more rooms than the family that lived there could use. Up on the 3rd floor there were several hotel rooms with doors largely unchanged since it was an operating hotel. The family that lived there openly talked about the house being haunted. I was fascinated by their stories as a child. Odd things would happen, such as repeatedly finding the telephone receiver out of its cradle and sitting on the table next to the phone. Light bulbs would go missing, apparently unscrewed from the socket and spirited away. The one anecdote that left the deepest impression on me was one that the mother of the family told us had happened to her. One afternoon, she was vacuuming in one of the rooms on the 3rd floor. She turned around and was startled to see a man standing in the room, motionless and staring at her. She described him as a man in a gray suit, wearing wire-rimmed glasses. He didn't say a word and just stood there, staring at her. Caught off guard and flustered by the man's sudden appearance, she said the first thing that came to mind. "Would you like a cup of coffee?" He simply disappeared before her eyes. I never understood why someone would offer a cup of coffee to an apparition, but my mother said that the woman explained that she was aware that the house had an apparent presence, and that she felt that it was benevolent and she wanted the presence to feel welcome. I wish that I had more details to share. I wonder if the house is still there today.
My mom and dad used to tell me when I was about 2 to 3 years old, I would tell them there was a man that sits on the end of my bed with a dog. My parents would pass this off as an imaginary friend and an overactive imagination, till one day my dad asked me what this man looked like, and I would describe him as a very tall man with a tweed jacket with brown leather elbow patches. My dad was so confused as how the hell would a 2 to 3 year old know what a tweed jacket. My mom used to work as a nurse and would get home late, so most of the time I would have been asleep in bed. But one night she came home to me sitting on my dad's lap, screaming and crying. My mom asked what was going on, and I would tell her that the man is sitting in the corner and he's angry with me, and I refused to turn my head to look in the corner. My mom sat in the corner and I refused to go to her. She picked me up and put me in her lap in the corner, and I began frantically trying to pull away. My parents were so confused on what was going on and let me sleep with him that night, as I was not calming down. I do not remember this happening, as I was so young. Fast forward to being 14 to 16 years of age, and we had moved many houses, so we are living in a new home. I was in my bedroom and my parents were watching TV in the living room. The only way I could set this out is the TV was below a window which looked out the front of the house. My parents were still watching TV, noticed a man in the window looking in. They could not see any features, just a shadow outline of a tall man looking through a window. Very confused, my parents were like, what the hell? Then it clocked onto them that it was actually a reflection of a man standing down our hallway outside my bedroom door. They both turned to get up and look. As they looked down the hallway, no one was there. Looked back at the window and figure had vanished. They called me out of the room and told me what had happened, and I got instant goosebumps. To this day my parents believe it is my guardian angel, but to this day I can never recall seeing this man with his dog. Only my parents seeing him, or me telling them about him when I was little.
Greece, summer 2008. I'm a 16-year-old. My father rented me a room so I could find some peace in a luxury club near Athens. One night, I hear a woman screaming in anger, knocking on the wall near my bed. I'm going to knock at the door. They didn't let me in. Then, I go back to my room again. Silence. Good. I go back to bed. The very next day, I get up quite early. The day goes by. It is good. But at nightfall, the same story happens again. This time, I respond by hitting on the wall. At my bedroom's balcony, I go out and try to see what was happening on the other side. But the light is off. But there's no doubt. What I hear at the moment are clearly annoyed and angry cries. I'm going to knock again. No one answers. I go to the reception to finally complain about the noise, although I don't like it. Maybe it could be a woman who has been abused by a violent husband, but the staff tells me that the room next to me is free, and therefore totally empty. I go back to bed. The story gives me the chills. Eventually a couple moves into the cursed bedroom. I'm rather reassured, but it does not last. When I go to the swimming pool, I see them at the reception complaining that their room is disgusting and that the room is very noisy, which is surprising because I did not hear a single thing. I'm starting to have nightmares. I have a dream of a woman hanging in a laundromat. The image disturbs me a lot. The staff probably offered another room to the couple who left. I even heard some knock-knock sounds on the wall. When I secretly smoked on the balcony, the light turned on by itself. I also asked to change rooms. This time it was in a building facing the one where I slept for a few nights. I was really obsessed with this cursed room. One night the person who now occupied the room waved at me, but I was in the dark. Maybe she or he was waving at someone else, but the screaming came back. The club is closed forever and I have never experienced a similar situation again. This is all pure coincidence. There must be an explanation. Maybe there was a living person who secretly lived in the room this whole time? Dead or alive, it does not seem okay.
I moved about 8 hours away from my family years ago. We go home several times a year. That time is usually split between my family and my husband. I have an enormous family, so I don't always get to see everyone when I am there. My 2-year-old son had met my grandpa only 2 to 3 times. My grandpa had early dementia, At family functions he would sit but not really engage. He would smile and would nod when you spoke to him, but that was it those last few years. When he was healthy, he was a giant personality. Absolutely adored kids, had a big booming voice, a big storyteller, and he was everyone's grandpa. My son had only ever heard me refer to him as grandpa when talking to my husband, family, or friends. I called my grandpa Papa, though. My son never heard me say that. A week before he passed, I gave birth to my second son. Knowing how much he loved kids, I FaceTimed him in the hospital and told him he had a new great-grandson. He nodded and cried tears of happiness. At this time his dementia was so bad he no longer could speak. My 2-year-old kept telling us there was a ghost and would point and say there's a man following my mom with the baby. It was unsettling because I have had experiences my entire life. I would just be super casual and ask my son if he was scared or if the man was mean, and he would say no. One night I was putting my son to bed and I pray every night, and when I got to the part where I asked God to surround his bed with angels to keep the evil away, my son stopped me, got a big smile and said Papa comes to protect him. I was in total shock. I pulled up a photo of him and my son pointed and said yes, the man is Papa. I asked him how he knew his name, and he then told me that Papa told him.
This was one of the strangest investigations of my career as a paranormal investigator. I was contacted by a middle-aged couple regarding problems with a car overriding the operations driving commands. The car was recently given to their son by the parents of a deceased teen. The deceased person was actually their son's best friend who was killed in a vehicle accident when the two had exchanged cars for the night. Their son had a new Jeep Cherokee that his friend wanted to use to go on a date. While on said date, the friend was involved in an accident with a drunk driver and perished. The deceased boy's parents signed over the title of his Toyota pickup, both as a general gift and to replace his vehicle that was totaled in the wreck. I investigated the car with the help of a Toyota mechanic. He checked all systems, including the computer, braking, engine, and all sensors. Nothing was found. I drove the truck for 2 days on my normal daily routine with my DVR, EMF meter, camcorder, and a dash cam running. No evidence collected. I returned the vehicle with my findings that I did not believe the vehicle was haunted. 6 weeks later, I was again contacted by the couple. The father was using the truck when suddenly the vehicle made an abrupt right turn, locked up the brakes, and went into a ditch. At the same time, a car driven by a drunk entered the road from a side street without stopping and proceeded to slam into the tree. All of this was witnessed by a sheriff who just happened to be nearby running radar. The drunk driver sustained minor injuries and the father was unhurt. I was provided with the sheriff's number and asked to call him. When I called and told him what I was calling in reference to, he was happy to share not only a reading of the report that he filed, but information he said that was not included in the report either. His report stated that while conducting normal duties, he witnessed a Mustang run a stop sign at speed and turn onto the road, fishtailing and tires squealing. Almost immediately, it left the road and slammed head-on into a tree at approximately 45 miles per hour. He checked the accident victim and found him unconscious and a minor trauma to the forehead. There was an open bottle of vodka spilling on the passenger seat. And now, the sheriff's statement that was not included in the report. I was parked facing an oncoming pickup truck when I witnessed it lock up its brakes and make a sharp right turn into the ditch. My initial thought was that it was stolen and the driver panicked when he saw me. Before I could react, a Mustang entered from a side road about 50 feet in front of me and turned toward the pickup, which had entered the ditch about 200 feet before it would have reached the side road. The driver of the pickup could not have seen the Mustang's approach due to trees and brush obscuring his line of sight. If he had not turned into that ditch, there would have been an unavoidable impact between the two vehicles. How he knew to react the way that he did is beyond me. The driver's statement to me was that he did not perform the action. The truck did it by itself. I live in a very rural area in southeast Georgia. I have 2 dogs who are friendly and love to play. One clear sunny day I had the dogs out in the yard when a strange dog showed up. It was running all around the yard with my dogs chasing it. They all 3 seemed to really be enjoying their game of chase, and it lasted for about 15 minutes. The strange dog finally ran full speed into the side of my home and disappeared into it. They were running at top speed and my dogs had trouble stopping before they slammed into the side of the house themselves. They stayed in that immediate area searching for the other dog. It actually appeared that they were frantic in their search, whining and sniffing while running in circles. I went to see what happened to the dog since I had witnessed the whole thing standing about 100 feet away. There was no place that dog could have gone. No damage, no hole under the house, no sense to it all. The dog just vanished into thin air. I had never seen that dog before, and have not seen it since. Ghost dog, maybe?
And that's it for today's video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, comment on which one was your favorite. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like to support the channel, there is a Patreon link down below. But that's it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Until next time, bye bye. He lives in a quaint little fort.
Oh god, I was picked up by an amateur too.
By the man's sudden appearance. She said the first thing that came to mind, "Oh, monsieur, take me! Rip off my clothes and use me as a vacuum."
That time is usually a split between my family and my husband's.
Husbands? Jesus, okay.
Maybe after this she'll let me go. My name is Steven Yang. I've been here for 3 fucking days. Please just fucking send somebody. There's a tree outside with a car and a white horse. I know that doesn't help, but please fucking send someone. I was parked facing on...